Welcome to tonight. We'll travel far from the noise of the modern world, far from screens and cities and the clamor of the day. We'll step instead into a place of stone corridors and soft candlelight, a world behind walls where the rhythm of life is measured not by schedules or clocks, but by bells, by prayer, by the simple passing of the sun. We are visiting a medieval convent, a cloistered world serene on the surface, but within its silence lies routine, struggle, and a kind of freedom that did not always feel free. This is not the world of fairy tales or pious legends. There are no flying buttresses or glowing saints here, only the creak of wooden doors, the smell of old bread and ink, the murmur of Latin spoken in hushed, disciplined tones, and the steady, unwavering passage of hours that do not change in the story. You are no one special, just another sister in a long line of obedient lives. But tonight, perhaps that is all you need to be. So let us begin with the day of a medieval nun. Imagine yourself nestled beneath a rough woolen blanket in a small stone room. The walls around you breathe a faint chill, and the air smells faintly of tallow, dust, and the dampness of dawn. There is no chatter, no laughter, only the soft shuffling of feet and the brush of robes. The chapel is dark, lit only by flickering candles. You kneel, and the chant begins. Perhaps a wedge of cheese, if the stores are good. You scrub, you sew, you tend to chickens or help in the infirmary. The tasks are endless, but they are familiar, and familiarity is its own kind of comfort. When the work is done, you return again to prayer. You kneel, speak the same chants, and hope your mind doesn't wander. But it does. Sometimes you remember your family. Sometimes you think of the outside world. You were told not to, but the mind has its own habits. Meat is forbidden, except on feast days. Talking is also forbidden. Your voice is hoarse from the day, but you speak the words anyway. Then, quietly, you return to your cell. The blanket is no warmer, the air no softer, but your eyes close quickly, not because the day was easy, but because it was full. The only sound is the clink of spoons and the quiet murmur of Latin scripture, read aloud as the meal continues. You glance at the other's faces, pale, eyes lowered, habit stiff from wear. You wonder what they're thinking, but you never ask. Latin phrases roll softly through the air, half sung, half spoken, like waves against stone. You don't always understand the words, but you know their shape. You've spoken them every morning for years. There is no pillow, and the bed is little more than a wooden frame and a thin layer of straw. You stir awake not from rest, but from the sound of the bell, distant, heavy, calling the sisters to matins. The day has begun, wrapped in linen and wool. You move in silence with your fellow sisters. After matins, work begins. Some are sent to the kitchens, scrubbing blackened pots or preparing plain meals, mostly porridge, root vegetables, and hard bread. Others, like you, are tasked with tending the herb garden, carefully pulling weeds among the rows of thyme, sage, and onions. Your fingers ache in the cold, and the soil is always damp. If you're among the literate few, you might be assigned to the scriptorium. There, in a long, narrow room, you copy lines of sacred text by hand under dim light. The scratching of quills, the faint scent of ink and parchment, it all becomes part of the rhythm of your life. If you're trusted with paint, you mix pigments from ground stone, gently illuminating initials with swirls of gold and blue. The hours are broken by bells. At midday, you eat in silence, a crust of bread. Afternoons are filled with more chores, more prayers. As the final bell rings for Compline, you gather once more in the chapel. The candles flicker lower now. The stone feels colder. This is your life, and it will repeat tomorrow. Hildegard of Bingen, the voice behind the walls now. Let us leave the quiet routine of anonymous sisters and step into the story of one who, though cloistered, was not forgotten. Her name was Hildegard of Bingen, a woman of visions, of letters, of plants and prayers. From an early age, she saw visions luminous, powerful images she believed were sent by God. For years, She kept them secret, fearing punishment or ridicule. It was not until midlife, after decades of prayer and obedience, that she began to write them down, first hesitantly, then boldly. She called her visions the shade of the living light. Her daily life was still marked by bells and silence, but in the spaces between, she carved something eternal. Others called them divine. She died in her monastery, surrounded by the quiet she had always known. Her writings, however, continue to speak. They speak still, in dreams, in chants, in lines of Latin on old parchment. A cloistered woman who saw the cosmos. Born in 1098 along the banks of the Nahe River in what is now Germany, she entered religious life as a child, her path shaped not by choice, but by her family's decision to dedicate her to God. At the age of 8, she was enclosed in a small stone chamber attached to a monastery, her world reduced to shadow, silence, and sacred routine. She wrote detailed treatises on the human body, on herbs, and on the harmony between nature and soul. Her books, written in Latin with poetic rhythm, described illnesses not as punishments, but as imbalances. She believed healing came from both the physical and the spiritual. Few women were granted such voice, fewer still were listened to, and yet, behind those walls, Hildegard's mind did not sleep. Hildegard was not only a visionary, she was also a composer, creating haunting, ethereal chants unlike anything sung before. Her music rose above the ordinary modes of chant, with soaring notes and unusual structures that seemed to echo the mysteries she saw in her visions. Her songs were sung in cloisters, echoing through stone halls, drifting on candlelight. They sought her counsel. They feared her visions. Some called her a prophetess, others a mystic. She traveled rare for a nun, preaching publicly against corruption in the church and urging reform with words wrapped in velvet but sharpened by insight. Beyond music, Hildegard studied the healing properties of plants and minerals, and yet emperors, bishops, and popes wrote to her. Through all this, she remained in the cloister. She founded her own convent, carefully shaping a community of women who studied, wrote, and prayed beyond mere obedience. Hildegard of Bingen lived to be 81 years old, a rare age in her time. The cadaver tombs of Europe. Death is devotion now. We turn our attention from the living to the sculpted dead. Across medieval Europe, in churches great and small, one can still find them tomb effigies carved not as noble lords in eternal rest, but as corpses. These are the cadaver tombs, cold stone bodies draped in decaying flesh, skeletal hands clasped in prayer, faces locked in the serenity of death, a quiet contradiction, decay made sacred. To see one is to feel a certain stillness, unlike the marble knights lying in polished armor. These effigies are stripped of illusion, ribs protrude, skin sags and folds, eyes, where present, are sunken hollows. Some are entirely skeletal, others are emaciated, mid-transformation from flesh to bone, and all are carved with care. This was not neglect, it was intention. The purpose of these tombs was not horror, but humility. Memento mori, remember, you must die. In a world where plague, famine, and war lingered at the edge of every season, death was no stranger. But the cadaver tombs went further. They made death visible, tangible, part of daily devotion. Their presence reminded monks, priests, and nobles that wealth and power dissolve in time, and that the soul, not the skin, must be tended. Some of these effigies are double-deckers. On the top, the deceased lies in noble form robes, sword, or crown intact. But beneath, another version of them lies, stripped of grandeur, bones bare, eyes empty. Above, the illusion. Below, the truth. One of the most famous lies in the cathedral at Évreux in France. It depicts a bishop once robed, now represented as a rotting corpse. His teeth are bared, worms crawling through ribs, a winding cloth barely preserving dignity. Yet there is no sense of punishment in his form, only stillness. Elsewhere, in England, the tomb of Henry Chichele shows the archbishop in dual form, richly dressed in life. and naked in death. The contrast is startling, and yet, in its time, it was deeply spiritual, a reflection not of despair, but of the Christian call to humility. These tombs often stood in chapels, visible during services, their presence quietly shaping the prayers spoken above them in the hush of stone and incense. Among the flickering of beeswax candles, the sculpted dead whispered not of fear but of endings, honest, inevitable endings. Over time, the style faded. The Renaissance preferred beauty, symmetry, idealized bodies. Death became hidden again, softened by drapery and myth. But the cadaver tombs remained in their corners. They did not follow fashion. They did not blink. Today, few visit them with reverence. Some find them unsettling. Others ignore them entirely. But in the silence of cold churches, they still lie, still folded in prayer, still carved in the likeness of what we all become. Banquets of the abyss. When silence feasted softly, we often imagine nuns living lives of quiet hunger and constant austerity. And in most cases, that was true. But within the walls of certain well-funded convents, another world quietly coexisted. A world where abysses ruled not with whips or fire, but with influence, feasts, and carefully arranged elegance. These were not banquets of indulgence, but of ceremony, held for visiting bishops, noble women, or patrons. They served as both hospitality and performance. The abbess presided like a queen of silence, dignified, composed, and aware of every gesture. The table was long, lined with earthenware, and occasionally fine imported pewter or glazed ceramic, depending on the convent's wealth. White linens were laid over sturdy oak, and napkins were folded with care. The food, while modest by courtly standards, was carefully prepared. There might be fresh trout from the monastery pond, garnished with herbs grown by the sisters, loaves of warm bread, dark from rye or barley, steamed in woven baskets, cheese aged, sharp, and wrapped in wax cloth rested beside pots of honey. Cooked apples spiced with cinnamon and vinegar offered a tart sweetness to end the meal. Despite the beauty of the table, conversation was limited. A meal might pass in gentle silence, broken only by scripture read aloud. The guests were expected to eat slowly, thoughtfully. Even laughter, when it came, was soft. The abbess maintained dignity not by denial of comfort, but by measured grace. The purpose of these banquets extended beyond nourishment. They were quiet diplomacy, opportunities to secure donations, protect land rights, or arrange support for the sisterhood. Sometimes, they even served as negotiations for young noble women seeking entrance into the cloister dowries, subtly discussed between bites. In these moments, the convent did not feel remote. It felt central, an axis of quiet power, spun not by armies or gold, but by discipline, reputation, and social choreography. And in the middle of it all, the abbess veiled, poised, and listening. The meal would end as gently as it began. Dishes cleared by novices, prayers whispered in Latin, candles snuffed one by one until the room grew dim. Guests would rise, bow, and leave slowly, and the abbess would return to her cell, where the echoes of diplomacy and roasted herbs faded into the rhythm of prayer. Quiet reflections, the weight of silence, then and now, and so we return, slowly, from within the cloister walls, from the echo of bells and the scent of damp parchment, from whispered prayers and candlelight, from hands folded in devotion, and bread carefully divided among sisters who lived more by routine than by reward. Life in a medieval convent was not made of grandeur. It was shaped by stillness, by repetition, by the absence of choice. For most women behind those stone walls, it was a life not chosen, but assigned. Yet within its limits, some, like Hildegard, found space to create, to question, and to leave a mark the world still sees. The cadaver tombs remind us that even the devout, even the powerful, return to dust. And the abbess banquets remind us that power can be quiet, graceful, and veiled. Centuries have passed, Yet something in those lives still speaks to us, and the longing for simplicity, and the rhythm of habit, and the comfort of knowing what each day brings. Tonight, perhaps you feel that rhythm too, not in a chant or a bell, but in the way your breath slows, in the way the stillness of history wraps around you like a blanket woven from memory and time. And as you drift slowly towards sleep, know this: you have walked through corridors once lined by forgotten feet. You have prayed among ancient voices. You have listened to silence carved in stone. Thank you for spending this quiet journey here. May peace follow you into your dreams.